Hey everybody, this is Doug Schauf with Remax Oceanside at MakeMaineYourHome.com. In this episode of the Make Maine Your Home podcast, I'm going to talk about the home buying process, and in particular, first-time home buyers. So, if you are somebody out there and you thought, "Hey, I'm going to buy a house," whether it's your first time or not, this hopefully will be some good information for you. But if you are a first-time home buyer, first off, congratulations on the decision to buy a house. It's an exciting process and it's a lot of fun. Can be stressful, but hopefully this will take some pressure off of that and take some stress off of the process in general. So I'm going to jump right in, and I got kind of some notes here and an outline of what to talk about. And really, the first thing is, what do you do first? Okay, you're talking, thinking to yourself, or you're talking to your spouse or a loved one. You're like, "Hey, I want to buy a house. What do I do now?" And before we get into like the pre-approval and the lending process and all that, really, I thought I'd talk about, in my world, being a real estate broker, the first thing you should do is talk to a professional. You could do some internet research and kind of get used to, what's going on. But I do recommend sitting down with a real estate broker. There's no pressure, of course. If you called me, I could sit down with you and kind of explain the whole process and help point you in the right direction. Or if you know somebody who's a real estate broker and you want to talk to them, either way, the first step to me is to contact a professional and talk about the home buying process. What I do when I meet people, I give them a few things. I have a booklet, I guess I would call it. It's called Buying a Home. And this, it comes out quarterly from a service that I use. So there's a lot of great information in here as far as what's happening in the market right now. So some of the information I'm not necessarily going to talk about right this second because it changes every quarter. And that way, whenever you're buying a house or whenever you're watching this, you can get an updated one. Just shoot me an email or you can download it from my website. I'll try to remember to put the link to it in the comments or the notes of this video or podcast so you can check it out. Anyway, this booklet has a ton of great information in it, as far as what to do first, what's happening in the market, how the whole process works, and I'll use this as an outline as we talk. But again, before we get into this, I just want to talk about the relationship that you have with a real estate broker. See, here in the state of Maine, requires that we give out this form to every person we talk to. All right. So if you've gone to any kind of like open houses or you've met a real estate broker before, chances are somebody's handed this to you. Whether they've explained it to you or not might be different, but we are required to give this to people as we talk to them. And what this form is it explains the relationship between you as a consumer and me as a real estate broker. And I'll touch on a couple things here that it talks about. Before we actually contract up, I call it, meaning, you make me your broker. In the eyes of the state, you're considered a customer, and I'll explain here. And before we contract up, us real estate brokers, by law, we're required to do certain duties for you as a customer before we contract up. Things like disclose all material defects pertaining to the physical condition of the real estate. Treat both buyers and sellers honestly, and you can't lie, you can't give false information. Account for all money and property received on behalf of the buyer or seller, meaning like earnest money, things like that. And of course, to comply to all state and federal level laws. Okay, so those are the things that we are required by law to do to just about everybody. Notice in there I did not say anything about giving advice or anything like that. As a matter of fact, in this next paragraph, it says, until you enter into a brokerage agreement, we may not act as your agent. We may not, which means we may not give you advice and things like that. So until you become what the state calls a client in this next section, we're actually not allowed to do certain things. So that's why if you've ever talked to a broker, we kind of instantly like, hey, hey, are you working with a buyer broker? And hey, what do you know, and like starting to explain all this and all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily that we're trying to make you sign a contract or anything like that, which of course, that is part of our process to work with buyers and sellers, but it is by law that we have to explain this, okay? So now, once you become a client and you contract up with someone, then you get a much higher level of service. Then we can, advise, for seller clients, the agent puts the sellers at, they always look out for their best interest. And for buyers, which is what this is about, we act on your best interest. We help negotiate for the best prices, the best terms, et cetera, et cetera. We maintain confidentiality, all that kind of stuff. And we are also, your specific broker. Now, the benefits to using one broker from your side is that you get one person that you deal with. When you're on Realtor.com, Zillow.com, looking at houses and stuff like that, you get to funnel everything through one broker. Makes it a lot easier for you, and all that. And then on our side, on the broker side, we get to work harder for you when we're contracted up. You may or may not know this, but all real estate brokers, at least all real estate brokers that I'm familiar with, we don't get paid until we're sitting at the closing table with you and you're a happy client buying a house. We're not salaried, people or anything like that. So by us knowing that we're contracted up and knowing you're going to buy a house through us, we can then work harder for you to get you what you want and to help find you what you need and all those types of things. So anyway, that's a great place to start, is to sit down with a professional and talk about all these things. Now, I'll go back to this booklet here, and I'm gonna, the first few pages of this booklet are about the current marketplace, which again, I'm not necessarily going to touch on. But then there comes some information that's, just is good for any time. And there's kind of like a glossary, or what certain terms mean, like appraisal, for example. Like, do you know what an appraisal is? And that's basically when, if you're financing a home, the bank is going to want to make sure the value of the property is there before they lend on it, and they get what they call an appraisal, which means somebody comes out to the house, they look at comparable houses in the neighborhood that have sold and make comparisons and try to find what they feel is a good value for the house. And that's what the appraisal is. Closing costs are things that, fees and taxes and insurance and stuff that you have to pay when you're purchasing a house, and that's something that we'll talk about in a minute when we get to the lending process, on how we can either roll that in or into your loan and things like that. Credit score. Hopefully you know what your credit score is. This is like the what lenders are going to look at to determine if you're worthy of lending, of borrowing money, things like that. Down payment. Now, I'll touch on this for a second, because a lot of people think that you need to put 20% down on a home. Historically, that's kind of what people have done, but you really don't. There's a lot of programs out there that you can go, even zero money down, through like a rural development program or a VA loan, things like that. You can do no money down. Most loans nowadays, like FHA or even conventional, you can do 3.5% or 5% down, things like that, 10%. So you don't need a full 20% when you're looking at this. You can come up with a little bit of money and still be able to purchase a home. Mortgage interest rates, pre-approval letter, things like that. A lender can talk to you more about that, and that's a good kind of segue into the next section, which is getting your pre-approval and talking to a lender. You can use, of course, call any bank that you want. If you are working with a bank and you want to talk to them, that's great. There's also mortgage brokers out there, which again, if you call your professional first, I work with a lot of lenders that I can point you in the right direction. I don't make any money on lending. Real estate brokers can't make any money on lending, but to me, it's more about the service that you can get. And so I can refer you out to some people to help you out to get you pre-approved. Now, what a pre-approval is a lender will look at your credit score, look at your debt to income, make sure that you are capable of taking out a loan from that perspective, and then also what kind of loan can they give you, like how much can you afford, that type of thing. So they'll be able to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you are approved for $300,000, $150,000, $500,000. They'll be able to tell you exactly what you're approved for. You'll probably have a rough idea, of course, of what you can get if you've done any research online, things like that. But talking to a lender, you'll get a pre-approval letter. Now that is important because when you're house hunting, you're going to need that pre-approval letter if you decide to put an offer in on a property, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But that is one of the first steps to do. Get your pre-approval letter. Make sure you know exactly what you can afford. Make sure you know exactly how much cash you have to put down. Make sure you have money for the closing costs, those types of things. Now, when it comes to closing costs, sometimes like on a $300,000-$400,000 house, closing costs could be $4,000 or $5,000, maybe even more. Now that is what they call prepaids as well, meaning most mortgages that you take out will pay your taxes for your property taxes and your insurance, homeowner's insurance, okay, for you. They'll pay them for you. So what you do is every payment, a little bit of money goes into an escrow account, and then when those bills come due, they pay it for you. So when you buy a house, there's obviously no money in those escrow accounts for the banks to pay those bills. So what the bank says is, hey, we need to fill up these hoppers. We need a certain amount of money for taxes and insurance. And that's what I mean by prepaids. And that would all be kind of under the umbrella of closing costs. So if your closing costs are $4,000 or $5,000, we can ask for the seller of the property that you're buying to pay for some of those closing costs. Okay, you might need to use it in a negotiation tool, like if it's a $200,000 house and you want to offer a $200,000 offer, you might write it up as $205 and then ask for $5,000 back for closing, to be able to roll it into your loan, those types of things. So anyway, that's a great next step, or really the first step after sitting down with a professional, is to get yourself the finances in order so you know exactly what you're looking for. And then the next stage is it's house hunting time. You've met with a broker. You've contracted up with a broker, you've talked to a lender, you're pre-approved, now you're ready to fly, okay? Now it's house hunting time. Now, how I work with my clients, and not everybody might do this, but how I work with it is I talk to my clients and I say, look, we both have a job, okay? Your job as a buyer, I say, you can look through Realtor.com, Zillow.com, all of those houses that are listed there come from a service called MLS. It's the MLS service that broadcasts all the listings, okay? I don't spend a whole lot of time combing through the MLS system for you because that's all public knowledge, all right? So I say, look, your job while you're sitting on the couch or, looking on your iPhone, looking at homes, if you see anything you like, let me know. We can then schedule some showings. We can meet out. We can group them together and go see 5 houses on a weekend, whatever you want to do. I keep a little bit of an eye on MLS just to keep updated, but a lot of times you might send me something and say, hey, have you seen this? And I may not have, So what I spend my time, what my job is for you, is I hunt for properties that aren't on the market, okay? And in the way the market is right now, it's very much a seller's market, but as that changes, it'll get a little different. But it doesn't necessarily change what I do because I'm trying to find your dream house in different ways than just looking on the MLS system, okay? If we hone in on and know what neighborhood you want, we know, what towns you want to be in, we know, of course, what price range you want to be in, we know the style of houses. Once I get to know you and I get to know that, I get into high gear and I can help find houses that aren't on the market. And I do a lot of different things to do that. Number one, I talk to everybody I know, just like my friends and stuff. Hey, what do you know? What's going on over there? I have somebody that's looking to buy in that neighborhood. I can send out postcards to certain areas. I can go knock on doors. I can talk to other brokers and say, hey, what do you have coming? Things like that. Those are some of the strategies that I use. And that's what I do, for my clients. And that way, we're both not doing the same thing. You're doing one thing, looking on the MLS, and I'm doing my thing. And hopefully, both of us working together will be able to find you the property of your dreams. Okay? So house hunting is kind of the fun part, I guess. You get to go see a bunch of different houses. It's really cool. We do got to remember that a lot of times We need to give some notice, to the people that own the property, unless it's vacant, of course. But if there's people living in the property, oftentimes we have to do, a 24-hour notice, 48-hour notice, things like that, whatever the notes might say there. And we need to respect that, okay? So anyway, once we get close and you say, hey, Doug, I really like this house, I want to buy it. Okay, so the next step is let's get you under contract, okay? And this is where by now we're contracted up, so I'm your broker and I can advise you and say, hey, this is how we do it. This is what we got to do. So to go under contract in the state of Maine is we're actually taking a purchase and sale agreement, like an actual contract, and we're just going to write out all the terms, the price, what's staying with the house, like all the appliances, the washer, dryer, whatever. We're going to list all that out, when you're going to close, and then the inspection period. And this is very important. The inspection period here in the state of Maine, is typically a couple weeks. I usually write in 10 days, and that's business days. So those first couple weeks of being under contract, you get to really evaluate the house, bring an inspector over, really go through it and all that kind of stuff. And during that inspection period, you can walk away really, almost really for any reason, okay? If you really want the house, hopefully you're excited about it. You don't just walk away for silly reasons, but that there is an out there. So it kind of gives you a little bit of breathing room. If you decide to walk away, you get your earnest money back, the whole 9 yards, okay? And so all those terms are listed out on the purchase and sale agreement. And since I just mentioned earnest money, you will put some money down with your offer. Like let's say, on a $300,000 house, you might, say, hey, $2,000, here's a check. We're going to put it in earnest saying that we're serious about it. Either my brokerage or the listing brokerage will hold that earnest money. It goes towards your down payment, but we hold it, and it's just kind of like your way of saying, hey, I'm serious. I want to buy this house, okay? And then it's very hard for you to lose your earnest money, though, because you got that inspection period that if something comes up and you need to walk away, you get your money back. If your financing falls through for whatever reason, you get your money back, okay? If you're paying cash for a home, you'll want to make sure that you get through that inspection period, because once you go through that inspection period, if you're paying cash, I don't have a lot of ways to get you out of a contract, okay? Financing is a different story, because at least if something falls through, you got that. You can fall back and get you out because of the financing contingency, okay? And then let's see. So we fill out that contract, and then we send it over to them and say, hey, this is what we're offering. Now, because it's a contract that we just sent over, if the seller agrees to it and signs that thing, we're under contract, we're good to go, okay? More times than not, there's some negotiation, okay? And the way the negotiations work is everything's funneled through you. You're the boss in this situation, okay? I'm going to be able to help talk you through it. But let's say it's a $300,000 house and, we go in at $285,000, okay? And I'm never going to talk on your behalf without going to you first, okay? I'm not supposed to be doing that. I have had buyers tell me, like, just go get it done. Just negotiate and get it done. And I always say, look, that's not the way it works. I always call you. If I go to them and say, hey, $285,000, we hand them the contract, they come back to me at $295,000. I can't just say yes to that. I have to go to you, and I'm kind of like the middleman for that. But I'm going to be able to guide you and make sure that look out for your best interest and go that way. Okay. So once we come up with we land on a price. Okay, you're buying the house, $295,000, just for this example, $295,000. Everybody signs off on it. We are now under contract. Okay, all the days, like any deadlines, are business days. So when I say 10 days for inspections, it's actually 2 full weeks. Okay, and then there's also going to be deadlines for you needing to get the earnest money in, need to make application for your financing. There's a few things. How we run at Remax Oceanside is my admin, her name is Stacy. She puts together what we call a critical dates letter. Okay, and it lays all that out. It has the effective date on there, which is the date that everybody signed the contract. Then it has when is the earnest money due, when is the made application due, when is inspections due, and what is the closing date. So all your deadlines are right there, and it's great. It gets sent out to you, all the brokers involved, everybody involved, so everybody's on the same page. All right, because to me, the inspection date is the most important. Okay, and if you don't know an inspector, which chances are you don't, not a lot of people do. If you're watching this podcast, I did a podcast with Brandon Lucier from Pillar to Post. You can go back and watch that or listen to that. But we, of course, have relationships with inspectors, and we can schedule that for you. All right, we can just call them and say, hey, we need to schedule this. Oftentimes we need to go by the schedule of the inspector because they're so busy, so we just book it and then, figure out, hopefully everybody can be there, all that. So we'll go ahead and do that. We can help make arrangements for you to get your earnest money to where it needs to be. And then also we'll get a copy of the purchase and sale agreement over to the lender, let the lender get going. And then ultimately, the lender and or you is going to choose a title company to start the title search to make sure there's no title defects like problems with the deed or things like that. Okay. I'm not going to go too much into that. Again, if you're watching this, I interviewed Eric Schaefer at Schaefer Douglas Title. You can check out that podcast and get a lot more information about what a title company does. But they are the company that also manages all the money. Okay, so when we get to closing, we go, all the money comes to them and they disperse it and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's how that goes. So the inspection process is critical. We go through all that. We really inspect the property. This is also a time where some negotiations can happen. If we find something wrong with the house, whether it's big or small, whatever you're comfortable with or not comfortable with, we ask the seller to either do the work, give us some money, do nothing. Those are some of the options. But either way, if you don't back out, once the inspection period is cleared, as we say, we're going, we're ready to go. Now it's time to just go through the financing, get the financing in order, and then ultimately get to closing. Okay. Now from there, when you're working with your bank, and again, I'll let a lender kind of talk this through with you, but with a lot of the regulations and stuff like that are out now, they're going to ask you for everything under the sun. And it's, at some point you'll probably think like, wow, this is a pain in the butt. But unfortunately, you need to go through it and you need to follow through on, what they're asking for and try to get it to them in a timely manner as well, just to make sure that we don't delay anything. Okay. So that's that. Once we get through that piece, as we get closer to closing, which is the day that you're going to buy the house, the banks will ask for some more stuff. Another term that you'll hear is we're waiting for clear to close. And that just means that the lender has said, we got everything we want. We're clear to close. We can go. We're good to go. We can go and sit down at the title company and sign all the papers. So the next section that I got written down here is, the actual closing. Okay, and everybody thinks this is like a big dramatic thing, but it really isn't. It's just we go to the title company, we go sit in one of their conference rooms. There's a closer that sits there and goes through all the documents with you. It's really kind of uneventful because by the time we get to closing, everything's really taken care of. I mean, we shouldn't be walking into the title company unless if everything's done. Everything's just ready to go. Okay, but when you do get to closing, you need your driver's license. Okay, I always recommend bringing your checkbook as a just in case. By then, you'll know if you need to bring any money or not bring any money, and how to bring it, and all that kind of stuff will be all settled out. So we're literally just going to sign paperwork. Depending on what kind of loan you have, the closer will sit there with a pile of paperwork like this. It'll look a little overwhelming, but it's not a big deal. Typical closings, maybe a half an hour. I've seen them go 20 minutes. It's really not as long and drawn out as you might have heard. Okay, the closers are very good. They go through it in as much detail as you want. Most of the forms that you're signing on that day can't necessarily be changed. So it's not like, and a lot of it's boilerplate stuff. So a lot of it is just kind of showing you what it is, having you sign it. I tell a lot of my clients that I do so many of these on a yearly basis. I'm kind of there to kind of keep listening. And if I hear anything that sounds weird, if I chime in, then there's an issue, because then if I'm chiming in, that means I heard something weird. All right. But the closing is really, again, you're at the last stretch here. You're just signing things, okay? And then once you're done signing, all the money goes out, everybody gets their checks or whatever, you get your keys. In the state of Maine, there is no 3-day right of rescission or anything like that. So once you walk out of that closing room, you own that house. You got the keys, you can go to the house, you can go in there, you can stay that night, you can do whatever you want. All right, you're ready to go ahead and move in. And that's the last section I have here on my bullet points is moving in. The house is yours. Congratulations. Have a party. Do whatever you want to do. Moving in. Now, when it comes to moving, though, I do recommend movers, but that might be mostly because I value my back. I don't want to be lifting a lot of stuff. I don't want to crack it. So you get to move in at that point. The house is yours. You get to have fun with it and hopefully live there a long time and enjoy it and raise your family or do whatever you plan on doing with your life and enjoy it. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you're a first-time home buyer, or you're just looking at buying a house and you have any questions about the home buying process, let me know. Send me an email, comment on this, and I keep track of everything, and I'm very quick to respond to things. Send me a message in any way you like, whether it's a text message, Facebook message, Instagram, whatever's your flavor. Look me up. I'm happy to help out in any way and anytime. So anyway, thank you guys, and hope you enjoyed this. Let me know. And remember, if you're going to make Maine your home, you don't have to do it alone.